Welcome to the NCO Journal Podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. This is a podcast series where we discuss published articles with authors and provide a forum for the open exchange of ideas, information, and solutions. I'm your host, Chago Zapata, Managing Editor of the NCO Journal. With us is Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Aquite, NCOIC of the NCO Journal. And today we discuss the article, Shaping an NCO's Career Through Mission Command by retired Command Sergeant Major Richard B. Adams, Jr., an instructor with the Department of Army Operations at the Sergeant's Major Academy. Thank you for joining us, Sergeant Major.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, before we kick things off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Richard B. Adams, Jr. I am a retired Command Sergeant Major. And as you already stated, I am a assistant professor here at the Sergeant Major's Academy. And I currently work in the Department of Army Operations. I am married. We'll be celebrating my 40th wedding anniversary here on the 29th of June. My wife, Ingeborg Adams, and she's a German citizen. Well, she's German, but she just recently changed over her citizenship to U.S. citizenship. So, and I was really surprised at her last minute decision to do that, because I was trying to get her to do that throughout those 40 years. And for some reason, she woke up one day and said, hey, I want to be a U.S. citizen. So I'm like, okay, who? We have 5 grown children. We have 3 girls and 2 boys. And one of my 3 daughters is currently serving in the United States Army. She's a major. And then we have 8 grandkids.
Congratulations on your upcoming anniversary, 40 years. That's a big number.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into your article here. Could you, before we get really cranking and have a conversation about this article, why don't you tell us a little bit, or give us a summary of what it's about?
Okay, so the article is about, as you said, with the title, Shaping NCO's Career Path. And so this was back in the early days during Operation Iraqi Freedom 1, first deployment. And so during that deployment, of course, once we get the warning order that we're going to deploy, of course, all the soldiers are going to be fenced in. And what that means is that there'll be no movement, no permanent change of station move. So they call it stop movement. And so we started looking at some of the personnel in our formation, and we found out that one of our high-speed soldiers that was working in our S shop there, the S4 to be exact, was on orders for drill sergeant school. And so even with orders for drill sergeant school back in those days, when you get a stop move, those orders are going to get rescinded, and then the soldiers going to get fenced in, and they're going to have to deploy with us. So Commander and I both looked at that situation and thought that there would probably be, well, first of all, we just wanted to kind of look and see if there was an opportunity for us to let this young soldier continue on with the drill sergeant school, and see if we had someone else in our formation that we could possibly replace him with. And so I did some assessment in the battalion. I found another young man, a soldier that can replace him. And then Commander and I had a conversation about that. And then ultimately we end up letting that NCO go to drill sergeant school. And so, and that was pretty much the end of it as we thought. But then it was later on when I left then Fort Hood, now called Fort Cavazos, and I came here to the Sergeant Major's Academy to be an instructor. And that was in June of 2007. And I believe it was the next year, it was class 62, that I ran our paths, that young NCO that we allowed to go to drill sergeant school, our paths crossed once again. And so he ended up being a student here in the Sergeant Major's Academy. And he was in one of my classrooms in the rotation at one particular time. So once again, our paths crossed. And then he left the academy, graduated, went on and did some good things for the Army. And then, so it was one day I was at home, I was getting ready to go to work. and I had the CNN news on, and so I just happened to kind of walk by the TV, and I looked at it, and I saw a picture of a soldier on there, and so I looked. And that's the same soldier that I've been writing about, the same one that we allowed to go to drill sergeant school, the same one that came here to the academy. And so I'm like, wow. And so come to find out, he's a nominative command sergeant major now. So I'm like, wow. I just kind of thought about that for a minute. And so, I had a lot of soldiers back in the day. And I'll just say roughly about 1,200 soldiers for that particular deployment. And so soldiers come and go. A lot of them I remember, some of them I don't. And the commander and I both, some of our decisions that we make, sometimes it's in a good way for these soldiers, and sometimes things don't work out. But in this particular situation right here, things worked out for that young soldier right there. And it was probably all because of that one incident that we allowed him to go to that school, and then he just took care of the rest, and it's history.
Before we go any further, though, I think it's important to understand mission command. Can you explain mission command? That way, when we're talking, we can kind of know some of the things that you're referencing. And I'm sure there might be some NCOs that maybe they're not that familiar with it. So maybe could you go ahead and give us a brief description or a brief summary of what mission command is?
Mission command is two-part. It's a philosophy, and it's driven by command and control as a warfighting function. And then what keeps it in balance between that philosophy and those warfighting functions is those elements of command. So you have the elements of command and you have the elements of control. And so in the philosophy piece, there's these 7 principles that you have. And so I know I can't name them right off the top of my head right now. I should be able to. But you have these 7 principles, and I could say one of them is commander's intent. And so if you crosswalk that with one of those elements of command, is decision making. And so with this article here, we talk about the commander's intent. One thing that senior NCOs should be doing is always operating within the commander's intent. And so when you crosswalk that with the elements of command, we're talking about decision making as a command team. There's always some decisions that you're going to make. Some of them are good and some of them bad. But the thing is that you have to make a decision and be able to live by it. So, but mission command, as you look at that, so the Army kind of changed it a little bit in July of 2019. Mission command itself used to be a warfighting function, but it has changed now to command and control as a warfighting function. Mission command is still at the center point of the warfighting function, but I believe that as I read through it, mission command was kind of used a little loosely with some junior NCOs, junior leaders, whereas that, they thought that everything had to be delegated, which is okay sometimes, but what has to be at the forefront at all times is command and control. And so I guess the Army looked at that and said, well, hey, we need to bring the focus of command and control back into the forefront of those warfighting functions. So, but again, not getting too much into mission command, but overall, it's a philosophy and it's a warfighting function.
When I started thinking about counseling a soldier, I don't necessarily, take out doctrine and start looking at the mission command principles. But a lot of what you talk about in your article is something that you're kind of doing constantly as an NCO. You're constantly assessing your unit. You're constantly assessing what your actions are toward the commander's objective or the commander's intent. But a lot of the times what we don't think about is how those everyday actions or everyday applications of mission command principles that I may not be thinking about, they have lasting impacts, right? Like they will affect the soldier's career. Just like you mentioned in your story, this affected a junior NCO, and eventually to become a senior nominative sergeant major. So I guess my question is, when we're doing everyday tasks, how can I operationalize mission command, or how can I start thinking about that more deliberately?
Well, I would say one is like for mutual trust is one that I talked about in here. And so mutual trust works both ways. One is with the command team, then one with your soldiers. And so one way that the soldiers will always, follow your leadership and guidance if they trust you. And so today's generation is a little bit different from when I was coming up through the ranks. And so the soldiers kind of talk a little bit differently than they did back in the past. But the thing is that, the shared understanding, and that's another one of those principles right there. And so if you kind of combine shared understanding and mutual trust and be able to incorporate that into your daily activities, soldiers would tend to lean more to look towards you and want to follow you and seek guidance from you on a day-to-day basis. And then you mentioned the counseling piece too. And that's important too, because that was one of the biggest issues that we had during my time when I was in the military. And I bet you if I would probably go down into someone's formation, it's probably going to be the same. And so, counseling, we have our formal counseling where we counsel soldiers on a monthly basis at a minimum, for professional growth. And so, but a lot of times, I always saw that, NCOs and leaders was like, wasn't really counseling their soldiers, and they was only counseling them when they did something wrong. And because it's easy for us to write a derogatory counseling, but it's hard for us to sit down and write a professional growth counseling. And so that is the one, and it don't have to really be a sit down conversation with a DA form 4856. It could be just you sitting down and talking to a soldier inside of the dining facility. One thing I did, several things I did. My day started off doing PT in the morning with all my formations. So we had a large enough field where I can have my whole battalion right there. So I can kind of just pick and choose who I wanted to do PT with on a daily basis. And then after that, I go to the gym just like they did, take a shower. And then the next place I ended up was in the dining facility. And so there was the time where I can be able to get all the nourishment in my brain that I wanted from those young soldiers, because first of all, it's presence. And so leaders need to be present with their soldiers. And so whether in the dining facility, is it down in the motor pool, or if you are in combat, and you're out there on those convoy operations and showing up in those convoy support centers, presence it goes a long ways with young soldiers, because they love seeing their leaders out there. And so that kind of sets things up for the mutual trust piece. And so be able to provide guidance to them, showing them different things that they can be able to make a career into the military, because some people, when they come in, they just want to do 3 years and then get out. And so we have a conversation. We say, okay, so, yep, you did your 3 years, you're going to get out. That's fine. But what's your game plan? What are you going to be doing? You have a family, you got, a wife, a husband, you got children, so what are you going to do? So we have no problem with you exiting the military because you did your time like you should, but what you going to do from here? So, and we as leaders are always, keeping our retention hat on, trying to keep good soldiers in, and some soldiers that's, not so good, we're trying to be able to change their course of their asthma to see if, maybe they can turn around and be a good soldier and make a career out of the military. But the military is not meant for everybody to be a career soldier like I did 30 years. But the thing is, it's a great place to start. And then if once you do your time, and if you don't have an idea about what you want to do, it might be a good idea to re-enlist and stay in. So that's where that shared understanding and the mutual trust and then and leaders' presence, all of these are concepts of mission command that you basically can exercise on a daily basis, like you said, without even having to go to a regulation to look up these things, because we do them every day anyway. We just don't be able to put the doctrine to it. And so here at the Sergeant Major's Academy, of course, I'm always facilitating doctrine. But another thing that I do as well is I'm kind of like a translator of doctrine, because, we don't walk around in the motor pools and the oily rooms and speaking on doctrine terms on a daily basis. So when the students come here and we start having these conversations about mission command and these concepts of mission command, then that's where the experience comes in. So I share my experiences with them, just like I'm sharing them with you today. And then that kind of brings the light to what this doctrine is all about when we're talking about mission command.
Sorry, Major, I wanted to kind of delve a little more into that. But, as I read your article, I noticed that you focused a lot on senior NCOs. And I'm the one who kind of went in during the editing process and kind of removed senior from there, because I think it's important that NCOs at all levels, learn from what the message that you're sending out here with your article. How can a young NCO use what you wrote, and to help, like whether it's a young sergeant or staff sergeant, somebody who's like down there still just working their way up, how can they use what you wrote in their everyday lives when it comes to their soldiers? I think maybe, I know you focused again on NCO careers, but there's also those young specialists that are looking whether, they're going to get out or stay in. They're kind of on the fence, and they look up to an NCO who is a mentor or somebody they respect. So what could these young NCOs, these young leaders get out of your article?
Well, you just said it right there, mentorship. So, every NCO, every soldier should have a mentor out there. When I came in, I had a couple of mentors that I looked up to. They showed me the way. I had one of my drill sergeants when I was a private in basic training. And, matter of fact, I almost got into trouble one time in basic training. Then that thing ended up turning into me getting selected as a assistant platoon guide. And so the next thing I know was, okay, so I was afforded the opportunity to turn myself around, and I was put in a leadership position. Next thing I know, I was on the firing squad, color guard, all of these types of things. But all of that came from mentorship. And so I've been a mentor to a lot of soldiers, junior soldiers, senior NCOs, and the whole 9 yards there. So, but I would say that based on the article that I wrote and some things that I could push down to the young specialists that's getting ready to go to that board to be a non-commissioned officer is find you a good mentor someone that you trust, someone that you believe in, someone that you think is a person that is going to point you in the right direction. And once you got a good mentor there, and then you try to strive to do some of those things that we talked about in the article, and just try to set yourself up for success, I think that's one of the keys to success as far as pushing this information down to a junior soldier.
So as I'm reading your article, Sergeant Major, I'm thinking, and based on what you just said, I'm thinking here, like, what's a better place to find a mentor that can talk about a specific subject that I'm kind of interested in than to like go to the NCO Journal website and find an article that talks about that, because I think what you're mentioning is important, that everybody should have a mentor, and I completely agree with that. But sometimes we need something quick information. We don't have a way to, maybe finding the right information or asking about the right thing is a little bit more difficult. And I just thought about it, like, if I was struggling with counseling, if I was struggling with dealing with sending a soldier or making the decision about a soldier's career, I can go on there and read your article and kind of find some takeaways, because in your situation, it was kind of for the benefit. Sometimes it's good news, right? The good news is, hey, you're going to get to go to this school. But sometimes, and a lot of times in the Army, it doesn't work out that way. It works out in the opposite direction. You know what? You're not going to be able to go to the school. We need you. So some of those decisions are going to be tough down the road. And I think if you understand that that you have an analytical way of making decisions, or and you assess, or you've done all your steps, that you're okay with those decisions, I guess is what I'm getting at. Do you know what I mean, Charles?
I think it's important to know that it's not always going to work out. You know, but the thing is that you have to put in the effort. And using the elements of mission command that the Sergeant Major wrote about, I think it's important that first of all, you got to know commander's intent. You got to be able to assess and not just kind of skip some steps, because if you do, then, maybe one thing might not, what if you didn't assess the unit, Sergeant Major, before, going to the commander and giving them your a list of options? What if you didn't assess it and they're just based on other things, maybe your guesswork or what somebody else gave you? So you have to take the steps. You have to do the work, be invested in your soldiers, be invested in their future, be invested in the success of the organization, and then do your best, I guess. I mean, would you talk a little bit about that, Sergeant Major?
Yeah. So I would tell you, so taking care of soldiers, we kind of use that cliche really loosely, but I would tell you that it's hard work, and it's like 24/7. Like you said, you have to be vested in it. And so when I became a leader, a hard strike Sergeant E5, I just really started vesting myself in the military as a whole. I kind of saw that I was going to make a career out of it. And so when I started looking at those things and started looking at my soldiers and what am I doing to make them the best soldier that they could be, to put them in the right situation so that they can be able to take my place one day as a senior NCO. And so those things are like grooming them for the soldier and NCO of the month board, something as simple as that, where they will learn all these military customs and courtesies that will probably help them out later on in the military. Making sure that they are squared away in all of their tasks that they're supposed to be doing, all those individual tasks and those collective tasks. Therefore, so that if we do have to go to war, they know exactly what it is that they're supposed to be doing and what's going to be asked of them. Putting NCO professional development programs together, whereas we be able to educate them and make sure that they understand certain things, and something as simple as how are you doing your finances? Because we got a lot of soldiers out there that are still having financial issues because one set them down, and be able to explain to them about basically, how to do something as simple as make a budget. What else? The NCO induction ceremony. This is one of those traditional things that, we need to continue to do. I did that both in garrison and in combat. And it's just one of those things that, we just got to keep doing as senior NCOs, because it making that transition from specialist to sergeant is probably one of the most challenging times for a young soldier, especially if they're still going to be in that same formation that one day, me and you was buds, and then tomorrow, I got to be able to task you and tell you some things that you got to do because now I'm an NCO. A lot of times, I've seen it where it's, well, let's just move them to a different unit or something like that. Well, sometimes we don't have that opportunity to do that. And so that means that, they're going to have to stay right there in that unit, and somehow, they're going to have to make that transition. But the young specialists get ready to transition to be a sergeant, they're going to have to seek some guidance. And that's where the mentorship comes in at. And to be able to just find someone to sit down, talk to, and be able to show them the ropes and show them exactly what it is that they should be doing and some things that they should not be doing. And like you stated too, that the NCO Journal is a good place because there's a lot of articles in there. I read some of them, and there's some things in there where, some junior NCOs can go in there and get some tips, and one of them will be from my article that I shared with them about the concepts of mission command. So these are just some of the things that I see that I can share with you based on that topic there that you want to know.
One of the things that jumped out at me about your article too is I was going to talk about assessment, but I think we covered that pretty good. Assessment, it means you have to talk to people and well, you covered it pretty good in your article. But the thing that jumped out at me was that the commander went to you and asked you to assess and tasked you with something. And then, you came back with options and gave him the opportunity to make a decision and made it easy for him because the options you gave him were pretty solid. It was a no-brainer. That was probably only one option, hey, look, we got a replacement. Boom. The CO just said, make it happen, Sergeant Major. And there you go. But what are the big takeaways from this? What can an NCO take from this scenario that you experienced?
Well, so as far as that piece, and I think it's the part that you want to know about the commander and that. So the commander, first of all, this particular, I had 3 battalion commanders in that particular unit, and so that's probably unheard of these days. Whereas a CSM would be in a battalion for 5 years. Most of the time now they're rotating in and out around about 2 years or so. But I had that battalion for 5 years, and I had 3 battalion commanders. And so that particular battalion commander was my first one, and I would say that he was a prior enlisted, and a lot of times being a prior enlisted gives officers a little leg up because one, they understand the NCO Corps because they came from the NCO Corps. And again, too, this particular commander, we kind of just hit it off right off the bat from day one. And so, he kind of just like when I first took over that battalion, he laid it all out for me, had all the command teams to come up and then basically just give me a briefing about the whole unit as far as what was going on with it, all the soldiers and just the command and staff and the training meetings is what they're called. And so, but I really appreciate that, him taking the time out to just, introduce me to the battalion like that and lay it all out and let it know. So I would say that mutual trust, the command relationship early on just started off right off the bat right there. And so, he trusted me and I trusted him. So with this situation right here, and I brought it to him and told him exactly what was going on. And he said, hey, Sergeant Major, hey, let's see what we could do about it, because it could have went a different way. We could have said, well, hey, nobody's going anywhere. Everybody going to stay fist in and we're going to roll out with what we have.
Let me interrupt you here because that brought up a good question. How do you establish mutual trust? How did you, maybe using this situation, how did you establish mutual trust? And how would somebody who maybe doesn't have that same kind of relationship, or maybe has an officer who wasn't prior enlisted, how do you establish mutual trust?
What officers see in non-commissioned officers, or what they expect for non-commissioned officers, is basically to be out there, be present, lead the soldiers, be available, and be frank with them, because a lot of times they don't want you to just be agreeing with them on every decision and every issue, because sometimes we're going to have to agree to disagree. And of course, that conversation is going to take place behind doors. And then once that door open, we're going to be coming out of there speaking with one voice. But that's the non-commissioned officers that officers, appreciate. And they want to tell them the real deal and don't sugarcoat things. And so if you do those type of things like that, and then that's just a couple of ways that you can establish the mutual trust with officers. Sometimes, and you can tell off the bat that sometimes, officers, some of them been kind of burnt in the past, about NCOs, because you have some NCOs out there sometimes not doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And then when that happens, then that means that those officers lose the faith, confidence, and trust in those non-commissioned officers. And so you want to make sure that you establish that and continue to do that all the time. Be professional. Be professional. Live by the NCO creed. My two common words that I live by on a daily basis and I still by is standards and discipline. And those two words have taken me a long ways, both in the military and out of the military. And so as long as you got standards and you got discipline and that from yourself, and then that's going to be like infectious throughout your whole formation. Your soldiers going to see it. And they want to be like you when they grow up. And I always used to get that a lot. And it's not hard to do. It's not hard to do at all. It's just got to do what you have to do on a daily basis right there. So,
Sorry, Major, I want to go back to your story of the deployment and the decision that you all made for that soldier's career. And I want to talk a little bit of maybe behind the scenes kind of thoughts that you all had. Because when I was reading this article and I was reading about initial deployment to Iraq, if my unit was going to go deploy, I would have volunteered to deploy. And I would have argued that that's probably can benefit my career just as much as attending a school. So what was the conversations behind the scenes there with your commander, with the soldier maybe, of your thoughts of going in the route that you all did rather than letting this soldier, go through the experience of deployment with a unit, conducting their mission, because that's what we live for, right? We live that's why I joined the Army, is to be able to do the job that I signed up for and do it overseas and do it in defense of our nation. So I wanted to know, maybe you can talk a little bit about those conversations that you all had back then and what led you all to go with this course of action where the soldier attended the school.
Well, initially, at first, when we had discovered that, we looked at the school rosters and we just kind of looked at everything to see, who was on orders to PCS and who was going to go to school and basically who was just getting ready to PCS. And so we just started scrubbing the list, going down through the Eaches, and then we came across that soldier right there. And so, and the thing about that particular soldier is that, so he was on our staff. And so our unit at that particular time, the headquarters detachment, HHD, we deployed separately from our home station units. Meaning as once we get into theater, then we start receiving all of our units once we get there. And so it was going to be critical for this particular soldier to be on our team as we rolled out. And so the conversation went back and forth. Maybe it had something to do because I was an ex-drill sergeant too. And I know what, yes, we live to deploy and we want to do that. And this was going to be the first deployment for this battalion since, I would say,
Desert Shield, probably.
Desert Storm, yes. Mm-hmm. And then, matter of fact, I missed that myself. Because I was on the trail at the time. And so when you're a drill sergeant and time of war comes up, we get locked in and then we actually train soldiers to go to war. So that's what we did. And I missed that one, but didn't miss this time around OIF-1. But again, Commander and I had a conversation. We went back and forth about a little bit, about should we let him go or should we just go on and just keep him because, hey, he was a young superstar at that particular time. And, we wanted to have the best team that we have to go forward because this is going to be both the commander and I's first time deploying to combat. We knew what type of units that we was going to be getting. We was going to be getting a force mix. We was going to have Compo 1, 2, and 3 soldiers. And so we just want to make sure that our headquarters was going to be staffed enough to take care of all of these soldiers that we was going to be receiving at the end.
I guess maybe how much did you all, I'm guessing the soldier had a preferred course of action, right? And so I guess how much of that did you all listen to? Was that a big part of what your discussions were, or was it more like what the mission requires and things like that?
Yeah, I think it was more of what the mission required, because the soldier was. I talked to him one-on-one, and he was prepared to deploy. So, but again, he did just like I probably would. You ask the question, because if you don't never ask the question, then we think everything's going to be good to go and you're going to roll out. So he asked that question, we'll put it out there to see, if he can continue on to go to school. But at the same time, he said that he will understand our decision if we didn't let him go to school. And so with that piece right there, I'm like, okay, this is kind of worthwhile looking into, assessing the battalion to see if we can kind of, help this NCO out, because basically, he's ready to go. And we were going to take him, but we found someone else that was pretty much like him too and was ready to go just as well. And then so we kind of like, okay, well, hey, why would we want to stop this when we still have just as good as another NCO that could take this one place, and then maybe, things will work out for this non-commissioned officer back on the drill sergeant school. So the conversation kind of went back and forth a little bit like that. It was a short one, though, I would tell you, because, I knew exactly what was going on in the battalion and what we had to do. We was already locked the cock and ready to go. It was just that one little minor piece there. And commander just told me to take a look at it. And so, but knowing your soldiers, and I wrote that into the article as well. We talk about the be no do concept. And this is another concept, right, that, it's hard to do. It's a little bit more than just be, know, and do. But when they say know your soldiers, you got to know your soldiers. And so it's just like, I always like to use, sports analogy, So if I got a team and, and I got this one guy that's getting ready to go up to bat, and I know he's, batting average hasn't been all that great, I might have to pitch hit for him, because, we in this position right now to win this game. And so same scenario with this one right here. So I had a good guy, first stringer. And then, and so I kind of looked at the bench a little bit, and I had a guy that I could bring up to be just as good as another first stringer as him. So it was really a no-brainer to be able to let him go to school.
I'd like to ask you one final question, Sergeant Major. What are the main points that you'd like leaders to take away from your article? Leaders are at all levels.
You focus on those principles, but Mission Command is not just about the 7 principles. Again, it's twofold. It's a philosophy and it's a warfighting function. And so when you look at those 7 principles that we talked about in the article and we talked about here in the podcast, commander's intent, mutual trust, shared understanding, those should be some of your good watchwords right there. And you start talking about Mission Command. And then when you look down into the third part of Mission Command, when it starts talking about command and control's warfighting function, and what keeps them in balance down there is what we call the tasks and the command and control systems. And in those tasks, they have what we call the operations process. And so the last 2 of those 6 commanders' activities, one is called leading, and the other one is called assessing. And those 2 right there are continuous. So you have to continuously lead your formations, and you have to continuously assess those formations. And so with those major points right there, those are some of the highlights that I would like for you to take away from my article.
Thanks again, Sergeant Major. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and keep them coming. And thank you to our audience. Remember to put your knowledge to the page, submit articles, and get published with the NCO Journal. Don't forget to check out our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll catch you next time on the NCO Journal Podcast.